AITA for taking back my house from my in-laws after my wife called my sister a burden? My name is Brian. I am 36 years old, and until recently, I thought my life was pretty much on track. I would not say perfect, because no life is, but orderly, stable, and with a future that seemed clear. I have been married to Jessica for almost 3 years, although our relationship started much earlier. In total, we had been together for a little over 6 years. I met her when I was still building my career and did not have even half the financial peace of mind I have now. That always made me believe she was with me for who I was and not for what I could offer. Throughout all that time, we shared goals, plans, and conversations about starting a family and having a quiet life. We were never an explosive couple or prone to constant fighting. We were one of those couples that seemed quite functional from the outside. We had our differences, of course, but nothing that made me think there was actually such a deep fracture between us. Professionally, things went better than I expected. I am a partner in a chain of clinical laboratories that I founded with a college friend a few years ago. The beginnings were tough, with loans, endless hours, and the uncertainty of not knowing if it was going to work out. But over time, things grew. We signed important contracts and managed to consolidate ourselves. I do not consider myself a millionaire, but I am someone with a very comfortable financial situation. Besides that, I was always careful with money. Maybe because I grew up in a house where every expense was thought about twice. My father worked his whole life, and even then, it often was not enough. That left me with the habit of not depending on a single source of income. That is why I started investing in real estate. Over time, I bought some apartments and 2 houses. I rent some out, and others I keep as long-term investments. One of those houses I never rented. It was a modest home, but well located in a quiet suburban neighborhood on Oakwood Drive, spacious enough for a small family. That house ended up being occupied by Jessica's family. To make it clear, I need to give a little context. When I started dating Jessica, her parents were already in a complicated financial situation. Her father had bankrupted a small auto parts store, and they were dragging debt for years. They lost the home where they had lived almost all their lives, and for a while, they were moving between relatives, constantly relocating, with no stability. Jessica used to tell me that it had been humiliating for them. When my situation improved and I bought that property, I made a decision that seemed natural at the time, to offer it to them so they could live there rent-free until they managed to get back on their feet. No one demanded it of me directly. It was my own initiative. I thought that helping the family of the woman I wanted to marry was a logical way to build something solid. Her parents and her younger brother moved into that house. I never made a contract, never set strict conditions, never charged them a single cent. I only asked that they keep the property in good condition and that when they improved financially, we could talk about the future. They thanked me immensely. At first, they practically called me a savior. For years, I assumed I had done the right thing. My relationship with them was never intimate, but it was cordial. There were family dinners, birthday gatherings, and those kinds of normal interactions. Sometimes I noticed a certain sense of entitlement, as if, with the passage of time, they had stopped seeing the house as a favor and started seeing it as almost their own, but I never wanted to make an issue out of it. I thought it was just my imagination or simple passing discomforts. With my own family, on the other hand, I always had a very strong bond, especially with my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah is 31 years old. She has always been an independent, hardworking, and quite proud woman. From a young age, she insisted on not depending on anyone. She has her profession, her own apartment, and never asked me for financial help for anything important. Our relationship is close not because there is dependency, but because we are genuinely united. We are the kind of people who, even though we have our own lives, know we can call each other at any time. And that is exactly what happened a little over a month ago. It was almost 2 in the morning when my phone rang. I saw her name on the screen and instantly knew something was wrong because Sarah never calls at that hour. I answered, and the first thing I heard was her ragged breathing. She was not crying, but she was in shock. She could barely speak. She told me she had been in a serious accident. At first, I thought maybe it was a minor crash, one of those scares that end with a dented car and a neck brace. I asked her where she was, and she gave me the name of the hospital. I left without even changing my clothes. When I arrived, the situation was completely different from what I had imagined. Sarah had suffered a serious accident on the interstate highway. A semi-truck lost control due to the rain and ended up hitting several vehicles. Her car was practically destroyed on the driver's side. The doctors explained that she survived due to an absurd combination of luck and the speed of the paramedics, but her injuries were severe. She had multiple fractures in both legs, a major hip injury, and damage to several ligaments. She had already been taken into emergency surgery, and additional procedures were still needed. They talked to me about months of rehabilitation, reduced mobility, and constant assistance. I remember hearing all that as if they were speaking to me in another language. There are moments when the brain simply does not accept reality that fast. The following days disappeared into a blur of paperwork, doctors, authorizations, medications, specialist consultations, and entire nights spent sitting in a hospital chair. I practically lived there. As for the expenses, I never hesitated. The only thing I asked was what was needed for her to receive the best care available. When I later reviewed the figures, the costs were substantial: surgeries, hardware, future physical therapy, specialized medications, aftercare. But honestly, that was irrelevant. Sarah is my sister. I was not making an investment or calculating a math problem. I was just making sure she had a real chance to recover well. When she was finally more conscious, she apologized for causing me so much trouble. That phrase broke me because it reflected the kind of person she is. Even physically limited, she still worried about not being a burden. I told her to stop thinking about that. As the week went by, the doctors were clear about something. When she was discharged from the hospital, she would not be able to go back to her apartment alone. She would need help to move around, bathe, change bandages, take medication, attend rehabilitation, and simply perform basic tasks. She was not going to be able to fend for herself for a good while. I started thinking about alternatives. I could have paid for a specialized rehabilitation center, but honestly, that idea felt cold to me. I also thought about hiring nurses and adapting her apartment, but even then, she would be alone for too many hours. The most logical option for me was to bring her to our house. I had space, I could hire additional support, and make sure she had company. In my head, that should not even have been a serious discussion. Jessica and I were a married couple. You were supposed to expect humanity, support, and common sense in extreme situations. That is why, one night after returning from the hospital, I sat down with her in the living room to talk about it. I calmly explained the whole picture to her: the surgeries, the immobility, the estimated recovery time, the need for care. Then I told her I wanted to bring Sarah in with us for the first few months. I even added that I would take care of everything: hiring staff, adapting a room, handling any financial inconvenience. I expected questions, I expected concern, I expected at least a gesture of compassion. What I received was something else entirely. Jessica stayed quiet for a few seconds, looked at me, and said, "I do not plan on turning our house into a recovery center." At first, I thought she said it out of shock or nerves. I tried to keep my tone calm. It would not be a recovery center. It would be temporary while she recovers. She shook her head. "No, Brian, I do not want your sister living here." The phrase completely threw me off. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she replied. "I did not get married to have to endure other people's problems inside my own home." I felt a knot in my stomach because I did not expect such a blunt refusal. We are not talking about just any problem. We are talking about Sarah. She had a serious accident. She cannot get around on her own. Jessica crossed her arms and said, "I am sorry, but it is not my responsibility." There were a few seconds of silence where I genuinely thought she was joking or needed time to process it. "I am not asking you to take care of her," I told her. "I will handle everything. I just need you to understand that I cannot leave her alone." Her response was even worse. "Well then, pay for a rehabilitation center or a nurse somewhere else, but not here." I began to feel how the conversation was taking a turn I never imagined. "Jessica, she is my sister. And she is still not my problem," she answered. I looked at her without recognizing the woman I had been sharing my life with for years. "Are you really saying this?" She let out an annoyed sigh, as if I were exaggerating. "You have always had that habit of wanting to help everyone, but I am not going to sacrifice my peace of mind because your family cannot solve their own issues by themselves." That hit me harder than I can explain because it was not a logistical discussion. It was the absolute lack of empathy, and at that moment, I still did not know the worst was yet to come. I stared at her for several seconds, hoping she would at least soften what she had just said, but there was nothing. Not a doubt, not an expression of guilt, not even discomfort. Jessica was completely certain of her stance, and that was what unsettled me the most. "I cannot believe you are talking like this," I finally said. She shrugged. "I am being honest. Honest. My sister is getting out of multiple surgeries, and you are talking about comfort." "Because it is the truth," she replied. "You always act on emotional impulse, and then we all have to adapt." That word, all, made my blood boil. All. Who are we? You and me. And I am telling you that I am going to take care of everything. Jessica let out a small, humorless laugh. "There is no such thing as just you taking care of it. A person who needs that level of assistance in a house changes the whole dynamic." I felt the blow of that word like a slap. "Do not ever call her that again." "Like what?" she said coldly. "She cannot get around on her own right now, right?" So, I am not lying. It was not just harsh, it was contempt. I still tried to reason. "It is temporary. The doctors believe that with rehabilitation, she can get back to normal, but the first few months will be difficult." Jessica interrupted me before I could finish. "Well, let her spend them anywhere but here." I remember getting up from the couch because I could no longer stay seated. I walked a few steps around the living room, trying not to lose control. "I need to understand something," I told her, turning toward her. "Does Sarah bother you specifically, or does helping any member of my family bother you?" Jessica took a second to reply, as if evaluating how much she wanted to reveal. "I have never liked your sister." That left me frozen. What? She is too nosy, too righteous, always with that look on her face like she is analyzing everybody. I never liked how she looks at me. For a moment, I did not know if I was listening to a real conversation. "Are you refusing to help a recently injured person because you do not like her?" "Do not oversimplify it," she replied irritably. "I am saying I do not want to live for months with someone I do not even have a good relationship with." It made no sense. None at all. Sarah had never done anything to her. True, they were not close friends, but they had always maintained a respectful relationship. That sounded more like a built-up resentment I had never seen. "This shows a serious lack of empathy, Jessica." Her response was instantaneous. "Forcing this on me is what shows a lack of consideration." The conversation died right there because I understood that continuing to argue that night would be useless. She was not in dialogue mode. She was defending a territory. I grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Anywhere I can think." I left without waiting for an answer. That night, I ended up in an administrative office we have next to one of the labs. There was an uncomfortable couch, cold coffee, and a horrible fluorescent lamp, but I needed distance to process what had just happened. I did not sleep. I spent hours sitting there, reviewing every detail of the last few years, wondering if I truly had not seen Jessica for who she was, or if a serious enough situation had simply never presented itself for her to show that side. The next morning, I was just as confused, but I decided to do something that, in hindsight, was naive. I thought maybe talking to her mother would help. I had always had a relatively cordial relationship with her. She was a woman who knew how to be kind when she wanted to be. I imagined that perhaps, as a mother, she would better understand the gravity of the matter and could make Jessica see reason. I called her around noon. After the basic greetings, I got straight to the point. I told her about Sarah's accident, the medical prognosis, and the argument with Jessica. There was a brief silence. Then I heard, "Well, my daughter is not wrong." I felt something tense up inside me. "Excuse me." "Look, Brian," she continued with an irritating calmness. "I understand you are worried about your sister, but you two are just building your marriage. It is not healthy to bring those kinds of burdens into a home." "Burdens?" "We are talking about a medical recovery. Call it what you want, but it is still a huge problem." I started gripping the phone tightly. "I am not asking for your permission to want to help my sister. I just thought maybe you could make Jessica understand that this is a family emergency." The woman let out a sigh. "You cannot solve life for your entire family, Brian, because then they get used to it." That phrase opened my eyes. Get used to it. Get used to what? I had spent years indirectly supporting her family, and yet they were talking as if the potential burden was my sister, the only person who had never asked me for anything. Before I could answer, I heard a male voice in the background. It was Richard, Jessica's father. "Give me the phone." The next thing I heard was his harsh tone. "I am going to tell you straight, son. Do not be a fool." I took a deep breath. I am listening. Your sister knows perfectly well that you have money. If you let her into your house, she is going to take up your time, attention, and cash for months, and then you will never get her out. I stayed silent for 2 seconds because I honestly could not believe such a level of cynicism. Are you insinuating that Sarah caused an accident just to take advantage of me? I am saying that people see an opportunity where there is one. That was the beginning of my total loss of patience. My sister was almost killed on the interstate. And that does not change the fact that you need to take care of your marriage, he replied. My daughter has the right to be at peace in her house. I heard that expression clearly. Her house. Something clicked inside me. I do not know if it was exhaustion, accumulated anger, or years of ignored little signs, but suddenly I saw with absolute clarity that this family had spent far too long feeling entitled to things that did not belong to them. Then I said, with a calmness that even surprised me, "Funny that you talk so much about peace in your home when you have been living in a house of mine for 4 years without paying a single cent." There was silence on the other end. A short, tense silence. Richard was the first to react. "What does that have to do with anything now?" "A lot," I replied. "Because the people telling me not to take care of other people's problems are the same people whose housing problem I have been solving for years." His tone changed immediately. "We never forced you." "No, it was my decision to help you, just like it is now my decision to help my sister." His wife's voice was heard again, more agitated. "Do not compare one thing to the other." "Why not?" I asked. "Because as far as I understand, it was fine to extend a hand to you indefinitely, but Sarah does not even deserve a few months to recover." Richard let out a dry laugh. "No, come on. We are your wife's family. And Sarah is my blood family." They did not answer. I continued. "I am going to ask you a very simple question. If Jessica were in an accident like this tomorrow, would you expect me to leave her in a facility so as not to inconvenience myself?" Neither of them answered directly. Instead, Richard said, "You are being dramatic and making decisions with a hot head." And that was when I said it. I had not planned it. It just came out. I am going to use my hot head for something else then. I want the house vacated. There was instant chaos on the other line. "What?" screamed the mother. "You cannot talk to us like that," roared Richard. "Yes, I can," I said with a coldness I did not know I possessed. "The property is in my name. You are there by my permission, and my permission has just changed." They both started talking at the same time, that it was disrespectful, that Jessica would suffer greatly. How dared I threaten the family, that after everything they had shared. I was not really listening anymore. I just said, "I am going to send my property manager to talk to you. We will be in touch later." And I hung up. I stared at the phone with my heart pounding in my chest. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt a mix of fury and brutal clarity. I called Kevin, the man who manages my properties. He has been working with me for years. He is practical, does not scare easily, and knows how to handle tense situations. I gave him the necessary summary. "I need you to go to the house on Oakwood Drive and inform them that they need to start vacating the premises." There was a silence. Today. Understood. Kevin did not ask anything else. Perhaps 20 minutes passed. I was still in the office when my phone rang again. It was him. I answered right away. "What is going on?" His voice no longer sounded calm. "Sir, things got ugly." I sat up straight. "What happened?" Richard came out holding a firearm. I felt my body freeze. "What do you mean, a firearm?" "He has it in his hand. He is screaming that no one is going to force them out, that the house belongs to his family, and that if anyone tries to enter, there will be serious trouble." For the first time that whole day, I understood that this was no longer just a family argument. Now there was a real risk, and what happened next ended up shattering everything in a way that had no turning back. As soon as Kevin told me about the firearm, I did not hesitate for a second. "Do not enter the property," I ordered him. "Stay outside and do not argue with him." I hung up and immediately called 911. I explained the situation as clearly as possible. An armed, agitated person making threats on a property I owned during an attempted notice to vacate. They asked me a few quick questions, took down the address, and assured me that a patrol car was already on its way. I grabbed my keys and left. I do not remember driving consciously for most of the trip. I only felt a constant pressure in my chest, a mix of anger, disbelief, and the feeling that everything was escalating far too fast. When I arrived, 2 police cruisers were already parked outside. The red and blue lights illuminated the entire facade of the house in an almost surreal way. Kevin was standing to the side, talking to one of the officers. As soon as he saw me, he walked toward me. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "Yes, but that man is completely out of his mind." Screams could be heard from the entrance. I could not make out every word, but I recognized the tone: threats, insults, resistance. One of the police officers asked me to keep my distance while they intervened. They were extremely tense minutes. Finally, the front door burst open, and Richard appeared in the doorway with the firearm still in his hand. He was red-faced, unhinged, screaming that no one had the right to force him out of his house, that this was all an abuse, and that he had no intention of moving. The officers gave him clear orders several times: drop the weapon, put his hands up, calm down. For a moment, I thought he was going to do something reckless. Fortunately, after a few eternal seconds, he ended up placing the firearm on the ground. The officers took him into custody while he kept insulting everyone. And then the others came out: Jessica's mother and her younger brother. The woman was crying, not out of sadness, but out of furious indignation. The boy was pale, completely paralyzed by the scene. The woman saw me immediately and walked toward me, almost trembling. "This is your fault," she yelled at me. I did not answer. Honestly, I had no energy to argue in the middle of police officers and an arrest. "After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us." That phrase gave me such an absurd mix of exhaustion and anger that I did not even react the way I probably would have at another time. What exactly had they done for me? Accepted living for free for years. The officers kept everyone separated while they finished the procedure. I was trying to process the image of Richard in handcuffs when I heard another voice behind me. What the hell is going on? I turned around. It was Jessica. I do not know who called her or how long she had been there, but she was standing by the sidewalk, watching the scene with an expression of horror. Her eyes went immediately to her handcuffed father, then to me. "What did you do?" she asked. The question pierced right through me because it was not even, "What happened?" It was, "What did you do?" As if I were automatically the one to blame. "Your father came out armed to threaten my property manager," I replied. Jessica shook her head in a daze. "You ordered my parents to be evicted." "Yes." "And you called the police?" "Yes." She put a hand over her mouth and then looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. "I cannot believe you are capable of this." That was when something inside me finally broke completely. Not because she disagreed with me, I already knew that, but because even facing her father in custody for brandishing a weapon, her reaction was still to defend them without questioning absolutely anything. Capable of what exactly? I asked with a cold calmness. Of setting a boundary? They are my parents. And Sarah is my sister. Jessica stayed quiet. I continued. A sister you refused to take in because she was an inconvenience to you. She clenched her jaw. Do not mix things up. Everything is mixed up, Jessica. Absolutely everything. The mother was still crying in the background. Richard was shouting from the patrol car. The brother stared at the ground. The police officers were coming and going. And in the middle of all that chaos, I had a brutal clarity that I had never felt before. I did not belong there. Not with those people, not with that woman. I looked directly at Jessica. This is over. She frowned. What? Our marriage is over. For a second, I thought she was going to react with rage, but she just widened her eyes without speaking. You cannot decide that right here, right now, over this. I am not deciding it over this, I answered. I am deciding it because this only showed me who you all truly are and how long I have been refusing to see it. Jessica started to cry, but even at that moment, I did not see genuine regret. I saw desperation because the situation was slipping out of her hands. Brian, you are exaggerating. That word confirmed everything for me. Exaggerating. Her father in custody with a firearm, her family living in someone else's house and acting like owners. My sister fresh out of surgeries treated like a nuisance. And I am exaggerating. I looked at her for the last time that night. Tomorrow I will send someone for your things. I turned around and left. I did not wait any longer. The following days were strange, quiet, and exhausting. I immediately started the legal process for formal eviction and also contacted a lawyer to start the divorce. Jessica called me countless times, first crying, then begging, then angry, then accusing me of destroying her family. I did not answer. Her mother called too. Richard, from where they held him for a few hours, sent me text messages insulting me. I blocked everyone. My priority became Sarah again. A week later, she was discharged. I went for her personally. I had coordinated special transportation, a proper wheelchair, medication, and had already set up a room in our house. I moved furniture, adapted the bathroom with grab bars, installed safety features, and hired a nurse with experience in orthopedic rehabilitation for the hours when I could not be there. When Sarah left the hospital, she looked exhausted, thin, and still very shaken, but when she saw me, she smiled with that mix of embarrassment and relief that broke my heart. During the ride, she asked me several times if she really was not a bother. I told her to stop repeating that. When she entered our home, the nurse was already waiting, and everything was ready. Sarah looked around and started crying. "You did not have to do so much," she told me. And it was at that moment, helping her get settled in bed, that I felt a strange peace. I had lost a marriage. I had suddenly destroyed a relationship with an entire set of in-laws. I had turned weeks of my life into an emotional wildfire. But even so, for the first time in all that chaos, I knew with absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. Because one thing became clear after all this. People reveal who they truly are not when everything is fine, but when someone vulnerable needs help and they have to choose between comfort and humanity. Jessica chose comfort. Her family chose self-interest. I chose my sister, and even though the price was extremely high, honestly, I would do it again without hesitation. Comment: this story really stayed with me. I keep thinking about how important it is to set clear boundaries in our closest relationships. True kindness and support should never feel one-sided. And sometimes the most responsible choice is to stand by those who need us most without hesitation. Self-respect means knowing when to protect your peace and the people you care about. It takes courage to make decisions that prioritize healing over prolonged discomfort. I hope this encourages you to look at your own life and relationships with fresh eyes. You deserve connections built on mutual respect and genuine care. Choosing peace can bring a sense of clarity and freedom you didn't know you needed. Let's all keep moving forward with compassion while honoring our own well-being. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.